Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Here we are, DCA Live. We have one of our compatriots stuck at a border, believe it or not. But he might be able to make it if he can get to an internet connection, but we're not sure. And we had an extremely violent Bitcoin weekend, including some historic moves, including a new record weekly close of 106,500. And when that has happened historically, that has meant big things happen soon. So we're going to get into all of that and talk about tons of breaking news and a couple of little concerns as well. But first of all, greetings, Mando. What's going on in your world?
Yeah, greetings. Well, all-time high close for Bitcoin on Sunday, although you didn't last for long, but it's been a good week, a very good week. We were just saying before we go live, I would be shocked if we don't hit or go very close to all-time high this week.
There's bullishness for you. And CTO.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. What a week. We will look at charts soon, I guess.
Yes, as always. Let's go through a very quick agenda just to give people a feel for what we're going to be chatting about today. And there's a lot more than just this, by the way, but a lot of people are concerned. Is the 4-year cycle dead or evolving, or is it going to be a perpetual bid? And then I've been quite alarmed and concerned. I monitor the OTC desks. For the last 6 weeks, they have not changed, but a ton of Bitcoin was purchased. So where's this Bitcoin coming from? That's kind of my question. Not to alarm people, but we need to dig into that. And then what should retail investors do? And people still have questions regarding, is it time to move to, this is a whole bunch of new income generating assets that are different from crypto and equities that are quite attractive? Is it time to rotate, or is it time to rotate to AI or out of crypto or into alts or out of alts into Bitcoin? So many questions. And, there's a Degen bet going on right now, which means they probably know something is up, which is kind of exciting or scary. The size of that trade now is $500 million on a 40x perp on Bitcoin. And we'll talk about so much more. So should we just jump in?
Let's do it.
Let's move fast. Bitcoin 4-year cycle, dead or evolving? And a couple of points I have here is, historically we had the supply crunch drove price up. We had a FOMO time, euphoria, blow off tops, and then people sell, rotate into altcoins, and then get out of the market altogether for a year. The question is, will institutions and treasuries, which are blowing up every single day, are they going to drive a new perpetual bid that'll keep the price going up perpetually? Or will we be in the same cycle? And we also have another kicker, and that is the fact that everybody's deeply concerned about fiat. Deeply, deeply, deeply concerned. People want out of fiat, and they're looking for gold, hard assets, AI, digital gold, who knows what. But I'm going to kick that to you first. It's a bit of a twist. 4-year cycle, intact or not?
I think we've moved away from a 4-year cycle. I've said that several times. I think the main thing is what you just said. The structure of the market has changed. And I also think that Bitcoin is increasingly becoming this safe haven asset. If gold, for example, were to fall 40%, I think people will be queuing up to buy it. So what I think you've got now is like the dips won't necessarily be shallower. You still get the correlation of one where everything sells off at the same time. Like we kind of saw one a couple months ago, right? But now that it's got this safe haven vibe to it, I think you're going to see it move away from a classic cycle like structure. It may even move away from the stock market cycle. Like gold doesn't really have a cycle in the same way. It follows a liquidity cycle. And that often can be in tandem with stocks, but often it's at different times it rallies to when stocks rally, right? Like gold is a safe haven asset when other things are selling off. So yeah, my view around Bitcoin is don't get out of the cycle thoughts around it.
And I know, Amanda, you're watching some of the macro stuff. Like we saw the head of the central bank or the prime minister of Japan saying this is now worse than Greece. They have lost control of the long end of their bond and rates are spiking. We'll get to that later. We now have 30-year in the US over 5%. Besant needs it under 4%. They've failed there too. There's lots of, it's like people are being turned off from fiat. Has that alarmed you?
I think it's been coming. Let's put it that way. Like you can't have runaway debt to GDP and runaway deficits at the same time of bond yields staying low. Like they also shut off QE during this period as well. So it's just been a perfect storm that these can go higher, and the higher they go, the more exacerbate some of these government spending. And I don't really know where that ends. I think they're kind of going to have to kind of turn back on QE. Let's put it that way, until they get the fiscal sorted out. It might not be this year, but you can't have the amount of debt that the world has right now, and bond yields between 5 to 10%, let's say, for
yeah, and in the US, mortgage rates are heading to 8% at this rate, which will the real estate market's already destroyed. Cash buyers only are out there. Banks are tightening lending. I mean, there is a serious problem here on the macro side. CTO, what do you think? 4-year cycle, alive or dead? And do you want a chart?
Yeah, so one interesting thing with the 4-year cycle is that if we look earlier in Bitcoin, the amount of Bitcoin that was mined was very important for the price action, because we were mining more of it. If we go back like many years and look at the, we can actually do that. Let's go back a few years and look at the longer term price action. So the 4-year cycle here was very, very clear that we went in these parabolas. They basically look the same. Every 4 years, they look the same. So this was the 4-year cycle. And the question then is if that's still the case. But earlier here, the price action was almost dominated by the amount of supply that entered the market because of the mining. But then in each halving, less of that effect is affecting the market. At the same time now, as we have much larger players that are buying and selling based on other criteria than the mining effect. So logically, the 4-year cycle should get less and less important. I actually thought it was over already last cycle. Turned out that it wasn't. The 4-year cycle repeated almost identically as last time. But I still think the same now. I think it's less important, and I'm not as sure that it will repeat identically. You can see it. You don't need to know any technical analysis. Just look at the picture. It looks identical each time. And then, of course, will it look the same this time? Who knows? If it repeats, I think it's more because of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like people expect it to happen, and then when it plays out, they start selling because they think it will go down, and then it actually goes down. But I'm not so sure about the 4-year cycle. I keep an open mind, and I'm definitely not sure that it will repeat the same. So in September, it's over, it's going to dump, and so I don't think we can say that. That's my take on this.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you just look at, let me see what I got here. If we look at just treasuries, and only 5 treasuries, and ETFs, they are buying nearly 3,000 Bitcoin a day, and that speed is accelerating. It's gone up 70% quarter over quarter, and we're not through Q2 yet. And that's kind of staggering considering 450 are mined per day, and the miners are hodling too. So this sets up question, we're waiting for the long-awaited supply crunch, which may or may not ever happen. But what it is telling us that, yes, the impact of the halving is less every time, but the demand far exceeds the supply. And how long before we go to the moon, which takes us to this slide. Somebody thinks something big is coming. This is pretty staggering. This is what I call the Degen trade of the year. A guy called James Wynn. I don't know if that's his actual name from the Bitcoin historian, but they started 200 million, then went to 260, I think, on Saturday, then 400 million on Sunday. Now it's at 499 million. And that's a 40x long on Bitcoin. Massive position. Amanda, you've seen some big degen trades in your life. How large is this? And does this tell us that they know something is coming that's really big?
I don't know. I follow this guy on X, and I don't know if he knows something's coming. He's just an absolute degenerate. He's one of the biggest whales on Hyperliquid and has made a ton of money over the last couple of months, mainly on meme coins. But now he's got like huge size on some of the majors. Like you can see this trade because he's doing it on Hyperliquid, so you can actually follow his account. He's also on X, so you can follow him there. like I said, I'd be very, very, very surprised if Bitcoin doesn't at least flirt with an all-time high this week. It maybe doesn't break through it, but I think it will touch there or thereabouts and then come back down. So maybe he'll take this off around there. Like, he's very much a short-term trader. I don't know if Bitcoin's like erupting right now. It's just showing continued strength. It's really showing strength. I think it can just be this grind up to 150 rather than like have this like violent eruption, in my opinion. But I wouldn't. It's difficult. Like, if you've missed it so far, do you want to go all in right now? We said when it was 83, I think, or I remember us all talking on here, like, this could be the moment. This is the best shot it had to break out. Now it's up around this sort of level. If I was CTO, he'll always say, like, what's the point in owning it here? Like, you've probably got about 3 or 5% of upside here, and then we'll find out if it's going to break through or not. So I don't know if you should be going like all in at that point. I think let's wait to see if it breaks through all-time highs, and then if it does, then you can. So I'm not saying you should go all in at 104K right now. It feels as though your upside downside of that trade is very different than 82K.
So you're not saying if you got 5,000 Bitcoin, Mando, in your pocket, you're not going to go 40x on it. Is that what you're saying?
You should have done it 82 when you told you to do it. Like these take the headlines right now, but I don't know if it's like the smartest trade I've ever seen.
Yeah. CTO, do you see something special in the chart that signifies a breakout? Apart from what we mentioned, we did mention when every time Bitcoin has a record weekly close, historically, it bodes extremely well for the future. It means a breakout's coming. Okay, we closed at 106,500 yesterday. Show us how it's bubbling up here on the chart.
Yeah, so I don't think anyone here can complain on the accuracy of our resistance level from last week and many weeks before that. We've had this at 106,100, and that's almost exactly where it turned yesterday. And why did it turn there? We talked about it last week because of people. They remember that for, I think it was 12 separate days previously, it has always turned there. So what happens then when price approaches that resistance level? Again, remember, these are people. So what will people do? They will do exactly like Mando just said. Who wants to buy exactly below resistance? Not so many people. So, the buyers start slowing down. And the sellers, there will be people who bought here at support or somewhere here, and they think if the price goes to resistance, I'm going to take some profit. So suddenly when price goes there, there's some profit taking. That's why price turns at resistance. And what it takes then is for someone or some event to punch through that one. And if we punch through and establish above, again, think about people. What will people do then who hesitated to buy just below resistance, just like Mando said? They will start thinking, oh, we're actually through resistance now. Now is the time to buy. So those people who were hesitating to buy before are suddenly interesting to buy. And what happens with the sellers, the ones who sold at resistance, they will start feeling, oh, shit, we actually broke through. I have to, buy back. So they become buyers also, and that's when price can start shooting up after breaking through such a clear resistance level that we have here, that has been like 12 times hitting, or 13, 14 times hitting at the exact same level. So that's exactly where we are now. And I asked Mando what he thought here just before we started the show. Could this even be a test? Could it be someone who's, planning to punch through here and you drive the price up a little bit to test, see how much sellers is there, how much supply is there right now? And turns out it wasn't that much. If you look at volume here, there's not so much volume here. Yeah. So I'm very excited here. I try to avoid predicting. It's better to wait and see if we punch through at this point. But looking at the consolidation here below, I would, if I'm forced to guess what will happen, I would guess that consolidate here a little bit and then try to punch through this level.
Yeah, I call it tapping the glass. There's only so many times they can tap the glass before it breaks. And I watch all the whales and what they do. There's an interesting one. I call them Mrs. 200. They buy in kind of 1,000 Bitcoin chunks. They sold 3,000 Bitcoin at 94,000 on the nose. And then they watched the market go up and they capitulated and bought the 3,000 back at 102,500. So they left, quite a stack on the table on that little trade. So I think the dynamic of this market is quite different. There are whales doing some very interesting things. And in fact, Amanda, you said something very interesting regarding hyperliquid. Let's look at this one. I have it somewhere here. Hold on. There it is. Okay, let's talk hype. So you mentioned this guy, James, whatever his name is, the Degen trader. Is he responsible for all these crazy fees on Hyperliquid? Because some days Hyperliquid has literally no fees, no users, and then some days it spikes. They made over 2 million in fees yesterday. Is this all because of that one trader, or what's going on?
Hyperliquid is they're pitching themselves as the decentralized Binance. To be clear, like they are seeing huge market share on spot and on perps. It's built by an ex high frequency trading firm team based out in New York, and like deep experience building trading systems. And it's got a really good UI UX. We highlighted it maybe 6 to 9 months ago on this show.
Yep.
And it's continued to be a roaring success. The token itself has gone up and down a bit. Hyperliquid has faced some exploit-like issues. Remember, we had those people that were like basically gaming it by putting up these spoofing sort of things to get liquidated and then dumping on centralized exchanges. That people definitely are gaming on the system. And the token went all the way back down to around 10. Now it's back up to 27. It's been one of the best performers out of every single L1. It's actually an L1 at the same time, so it's its own chain. But although the main perp dex / spot dex is the main thing on the platform. But no, look out for Hyperliquid. They're trying to pitch themselves as decentralized Binance, and they're winning a lot of market share.
Yeah, interesting. CT, have you tracked Hyperliquid, and what is the underpinning technology behind it?
Yeah, I was late to this one actually, and unfortunately I didn't really trade the coin when it started, even though we talked about it here. And but I think if I can show the chart here 1 second.
Yeah.
So exactly as Mando said, it has had a fantastic recovery. This is actually a very strong chart, and it's moving up to further breakout levels. So it's definitely very interesting. And yeah, I wish I paid more attention to it when we talked about it. I think it was already last year on the show.
Yeah, well, last year. Like it was around this time last year that it first launched.
Yeah. This one doesn't go all the way back to the beginning, I think. But it's definitely very interesting. And just to point out here that this one is at a very interesting level here. It could definitely go further. I haven't actually not used it myself, so I should do that.
Yeah, I don't see it listed as an L1 per se.
Yeah, L1 is a loose sense of the word. I think when I brought it up, when the token came out, Marty was not best happy with being calling L1. There's only like 3 or 4 validators. So it's incredibly centralized as an L1. It was originally an Arbitrum L3 chain, and then it's like converted into being an L1 itself, although it's EVM. There are some native like meme coins on it that people use, but it is largely just this Hyperliquid trading platform. There's been a few others like this. DYDX did something similar, and I don't know if GMX did. I think GMX has been talking recently about doing something like this, but the major perp dex it's attractive for them to go down the chain route.
Good. Well, let's get back to our story and try catch up on where we're bouncing all around, but that makes it fun. Let's talk wrap up the Bitcoin side of the story. We've got the Degen Trader of the Year. The oligarchs are coming. Russian billionaires are coming because Putin lifted all restrictions, or is going to lift this week, all restrictions on crypto buying and selling. And there's a lot of money in Russia, but it tends to be concentrated amongst the big players. So that was kind of interesting. I don't know if anybody heard anything about that. Is that big for the Bitcoin space, CTO? oligarchs coming to Bitcoin? Or maybe they already have their bags full?
Yeah, Putin called and asked about large online. I said it's gold, but no, I'm kidding. I don't know, but I imagine like if you're sitting in Russia and you're sanctioned from the whole world, and there is Bitcoin, perhaps a good alternative to gold, right? But who knows?
Yeah, exactly. And then so you have people mocking Warren Buffett. Mando, you've got Bitcoin is now twice the market cap of Berkshire Hathaway, but they have nearly $400 billion in fiat, melting ice cubes. In fact, I think it was Michael Saylor ridiculed him and said, you're losing $3 billion a month in fiat debasement of shareholder value, $3 billion. Why don't you just use some of that, even a tiny position into Bitcoin? I think, considering Warren is retiring, he doesn't want to rock the boat. He is a legend. He's proven his legacy. And before he exits in September, he's okay with 4% treasury yields. What's your take on this?
Does that man look like he cares about buying Bitcoin right now? I don't think he cares one bit. I think he was called a genius about a month ago. Obviously, stuff has ripped back since then. But I think largely that portfolio is defensive for two reasons. One is obviously that he is retiring and he's handing over the reins and wanting to probably have a clean book. The second thing is they like to keep high cash balances because a large bit of their business is in insurance, so they like to keep it always has a fairly high cash balance, these sort of insurance businesses. So I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny, Saylor calling him out, but maybe they move into Bitcoin. Maybe they do. I think if you have that much wealth, these things do have to go through your mind. Like the wealthier you get, the more paranoid you can get about losing it all. And Bitcoin does seem like if I was a multi-billionaire, I would be thinking about something like Bitcoin as an insurance policy, being like, if the US somehow lost its hegemony, or if something happened, it's becoming one of those assets where people want to own it, similar to gold. So it's in a good spot.
You triggered something there, Amanda, in my head. I always think about curves and cycles and everything else. And I always spoke of this is when you have no money, you can be a degen, you can take on extreme risk. And then when you start making money where you're comfortable, then you get very fearful of losing it. And then when you have all the money in the world, then you can go degen again. Do you believe in that type of cycle? Or you seem to be hinting at, well, you got all the money in the world, you just want to be very defensive. And then again, even if you just allocate 1% of your portfolio into something like Bitcoin, if you lose it all, it doesn't matter. If it's 2 to 5%, it can hurt.
It's something that I think people just don't really understand as you get wealthy. The wealthier you get more worried about tail risks. You get more worried about suddenly losing it at some point. That's why people try to put it into harder assets often, because they don't want to wake up one day and it's all gone. So they normally become slightly more defensive in their business activities, but they also look for assets which will mean that whatever happens, they're going to be okay. It's not like as you get more wealthy, like your problems change. They don't go away. You just think people just create new problems for themselves. And the number one fear I think I've seen in rich people is they're worried that one day they're going to wake up and it's all gone. And Bitcoin is a good insurance policy for that.
And by the way, I just want to insert, don't forget to links below for these channels, these great people, Mando's newsletter, Mando on Twitter, CTO's website, Indicator, Twitter, YouTube channel, chase them all. But one thing I just do want to say is Bitcoin is up $1,200 since we started, which is good news, CTO. What do you think about being defensive or not?
Yes. So I had, now it's like 3 years ago or something, but I had an interview. I spoke with a guy who had like a gold storage company in Singapore, like a huge vault building where he has gold inside, and then you can kind of buy a right to some of you can store your gold in there. You buy gold and it's in there, and you own that piece of gold. And he said something that actually stuck with me. That he said many people buy gold as an insurance policy. If fiat collapses, the economy goes haywire. But they buy gold through the bank, some sort of paper gold system. You have a right in something which gives you some right to gold. And when everything goes well, there's no difference. gold goes up, your value in when you log into your bank has gone up also. There's no difference. You feel you have gold. But if that actually happens, the reason that they bought gold in the first place, to have some protection in case fiat and the whole thing goes haywire, then that's not going to work, because then the whole system will collapse, like banks will collapse. Imagine if fiat somehow almost goes under. What will happen? The whole traditional banking ecosystem will collapse. So the gold you thought you had to protect against that, it's not going to work. You're not going to have the gold. They're going to say, sorry, we're bankrupt. You don't have it anymore. Thank you. Goodbye. You actually have to have some physical gold for that to work. And then he built this huge vault, this huge building in Singapore, because he said that's the most stable country in the world. So that's where he had the gold. And that's what Bitcoin does. Bitcoin does that without needing a building in Singapore with guards and vaults and stuff. You can do it like in the comfort of your home with a ledger, and it gives that same protection. So I think exactly like Mando said, I do think people are thinking in that way. Like, what's the tail risk? How big percent risk is it that Japan or the US or some country in Europe, their whole fiat system goes collapse? We get, ultra inflation. Well, what's it called? It's like a runaway inflation.
Yeah,
hyperinflation. Not hyperliquid, but hyperinflation. And the money is almost gone. What's the percentage risk of that to happen? Is it 1%? Is it 5%? Is it 10% that could happen? And I think exactly like Mando said, if we think about people who have done something successfully for 40 years, if I can share this tab here, which is Berkshire Hathaway's annual report.
I don't see it shared. Oh, there. Okay.
So here's their annual report on their great homepage. Have you been to
Omaha? Yeah, many times.
Have you been to
I always
our homepage? By the way, it looks like this. I love it.
It's horrible.
And here is like the annual report. It's just a table. Here is 1965. And compared to S&P 500. Then it does one each year. 1965, 66, 70s, 1980s, 1990s, 2010, 2000, and 2024. 25% S&P 500 in the second column. And then they just sum it up. Berkshire Hathaway, 5.5 million %. S&P 500, 39,000%. What if there comes one more year and they lose it all?
Legacy is gone. Yeah.
Be sad, right? That would be really, really sad. And if there's 10% for something really bad to happen each year, if you've done this since 1965, you really start thinking about that. How to avoid that last 5% risk of something really bad to happen, or 10% risk. So I think exactly like Mando said, if you made some wealth and you intend to keep it over decades, you have to start thinking about the tail risk. Even if we don't think that these bad things will happen, how many percent risk is it? I mean, if it's 5% every year, better take cover for it. And Bitcoin is one way to do that. So I do think this is going to sail up. Today, gold fills that use case, but it's difficult to manage if you're not the central bank and have your own vault. Bitcoin is easier to practically do this with.
Yeah, and in fact, there's a couple of things that is very important there for people to listen to here is the miracle of compounding. Just scroll down. Some of the returns aren't extraordinary, but the compounding over time is extraordinary. So that is like 5.5 million % since 1964. And the same type of thing happens. That's why I always stress, get in early, get in with conviction on winning assets, and sometimes just set it and forget it and wait. The other thing that's very interesting about Warren Buffett, and people don't know this secret, but this started as I think a furniture store, if I'm not mistaken. He bought a holding company, and then he started investing in different things like Coca-Cola and insurance companies and that type of thing. But with the insurance company play, they had a lot of assets. and he could redivert their huge holdings, because insurance companies take in money and they pay it out over time. He could take that insurance money and then allocate it to his other investments. So he became this like a little infinite money glitch too, which is super interesting. But let's get back to the story. A question came up here from L. Berg. You've been saying forever, why does it always seem to be Bitcoin to buy? Well, the first part of the answer to that is, as price rises, people sell automatically. People that bought the dip, the short-term holders, maybe they took some profit as we hit 105, 106, 107K yesterday. But there is a little concern, and that is price suppression questions. And I always think about this, whales and large players, they manipulate markets, wash trading. You mentioned spoofing earlier, Mando, exchange liquidity. I was looking at the sell walls yesterday for, I was excited to get above 106K. I thought once we break that level, which is historic resistance, we could go higher faster. And there was only like 240 Bitcoin in the sell wall. Anybody could have blown that up. But there was resistance. And then more money came and it just came back. And then when I look at the OTC desks, literally over the last 6 weeks, the OTC desk balance has not changed despite nearly 100,000 Bitcoin being bought. What's going on? Is somebody trying to keep a lid on price? Now we have come from 74K straight up to 104K. That's a big move, but is there something to be concerned about here? Is this just typical market dynamics? Or are the ETFs actually buying spot Bitcoin? Or is it paper? I know it's like conspiracy theories, silver tinfoil hat on and stuff, but it is a concern for people and myself.
Maybe. There may be something going on here where they're not buying real Bitcoin. I think the obvious sellers are, like natural sellers as the price goes higher, or miners. We've had a few distributions from Mt. Gox, so maybe there's been some of that, bit of an overhang. But unlike other times, there hasn't been this like obvious pool of Bitcoin where it's like, oh, these guys are going to have to sell. We've always really had that for the last few years, and this year has been the kind of the cleanest for that. We've kind of come towards the end of Mt. Gox now already, and most governments are not selling now. Particularly the US government has basically turned around and said they're not going to sell. So I think there will be a genuine supply crunch here. I do think that the way that it's headed makes me feel that people are locking their Bitcoin into cold storage, and the amount of free float of Bitcoin will continue to go down. I think that figure of the amount of Bitcoin held on exchanges and at OTC's desk and at OTC desk is going to head lower here.
Yeah, you mentioned supply crunch. We can talk about that in a minute. CTO, what do you see? Is it possible there's fractional banking happening in the Bitcoin world, or paper Bitcoin being used instead of actual spot buying?
I hope not. I hope not. But I don't know either. I think I have a feeling we don't have complete insight into all the Bitcoin deals. Maybe they don't go through the OTC desks. I'm not sure, but I do think that once we break through this resistance, assuming we do, I do think there will be a supply crunch. I mean, if we break through there, who's going to sell? Who wants to sell then?
Yeah.
So I think either we break through then, there becomes a supply crunch. As I said before, everyone who sold at resistance, they have to buy back, so they will eat up supply, and the people who hesitated before, they will buy. So the only reason for it to crash down then is if it's like a deliberate fake. What I just said now, everyone understands. So a lot of people will buy back there. Then there could be a business case to try to liquidate everyone, all the new entries, to kind of forcefully push price down, liquidate everyone, and then ride it up again. So that's, I think, the only two scenarios to watch out for there. So if anyone is using leverage here, be careful, guys. Like, if you don't know what you're doing, don't try to copy this 40x guy or something like that. It could get hairy. And I don't think we know exactly where all the trades are happening, as you pointed out, James.
Yeah, and in fact, Michael Saylor did say in his event last week that they are using AI to buy Bitcoin, which tells me if that's the case, they're not using the OTC desks. But it would be for that type of volume, for them to buy, they just bought nearly 8,000 Bitcoin. That means they're buying one literally every few minutes almost, which is heavy. And they have, if they continue the rate of buying that they are right now, in 3 weeks they'll have over 600,000 Bitcoin, and he's just getting as fast as he possibly can as well. And that takes us to our next point. We kind of touched on it briefly yesterday, but it has a lot of people intrigued, because the biggest concern right now that we hear out there in the market is, okay, are we getting to the top of the market? Should we take profit? Should we rotate? Should we move to income strategies? And there's these two tools called Strive and STRK from MicroStrategy. One, the STRK offers 8%, the Strive offers 10%. And people are thinking, it's kind of, Amanda, reminds me of you last year in JLP, getting your 30% and being happy with that. What do you say, Mando, first? Should people be using these Bitcoin proxies, or should they be moving to Bitcoin proxies as income strategies, or stick with spot Bitcoin? It comes in again and again and again. I'd like to ask you what you would do.
I actually prefer these to the common stock of MicroStrategy, just because they have a yield and you've got similar upside, and they actually rank slightly higher in terms of seniority. So I do like those sort of things. I continue to question whether this is just a Saylor thing, where he can have a, what does MicroStrategy trade at? Around 2x book?
1.84 today.
Over the last few months, we've seen probably a dozen, maybe a couple dozen companies all saying we're going to try and do the same, because they're all trying to get that same sort of valuation, right? Where like we'll do the same thing. Give us 1.8x book. I don't know. Like, it's still kind of an unknown, whether it's just Saylor can command this and we'll see a failure from all the other people who are trying to copy it, or if there is actual real other value here from an equity perspective. I look at MicroStrategy similar to how I would look at other companies that generally buy a commodity and then think about making assets from them. So, making an income stream from them, because I think that's kind of the hope for MicroStrategy in the long run. And the biggest ones are the big commodities traders like Glencore. And then you could arguably say it's not dissimilar to like a bank, where they like buy assets and they try and make a yield from either trading them or owning them. Both of those don't trade anywhere near 1.8x book. Like, I think Glencore trades at 1.2x book, and banks can trade around 1x book. So he's got some magic sauce here, and I'm interested to see how long it continues. I think the amount of people coming in is probably going to slightly dilute his uniqueness, but I'm not going to bet against it. I'd never be short MicroStrategy, because it feels like that's also a very common trade, and I feel like he can. I'm also not going to short the equity value potentially of Bitcoin in the future. I don't know what he can do with that business that would be different to what other people do with assets. So let's see. But I do like the converts or the pref. Stock more.
This is a funny little meme that came out. One of the things to combat what you said, many people don't have an on-ramp to buy Bitcoin. And that is why they go after Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy. If you're talking sovereign wealth funds in Norway, California pension funds, etc., they can't buy Bitcoin, but they can buy stocks. And that's why they're flooding in. And then all of the other options they have, all the leveraged ETFs, these income generating assets, are driving a huge amount of demand for this asset. But I love this one. Shout out to Cal. How one man cooked up a Bitcoin-backed empire, breaking TradFi. Very funny. Anyway, the memes are great. But the CTO, what do you think of this? Would you rotate out of, say, Bitcoin into one of these income generating 10% yield assets at the top of the market?
Yeah, I'm a little bit hesitant, how I should say, to high yield paying assets in crypto, wise from experience. So speaking of tail risk there, I don't own any of them to say I'm fine to earn slightly less, but reduce the risk of something catastrophic happening. That's and that's not for everyone, but that's the case for me. And I don't know, like, is there a chance that any of these go really bust? I mean, something really unexpected would have to happen. But is it possible? You know, never say never. So I try to reduce risk as much as possible, and I'm fine to not earn the yield. I mean, Bitcoin has gone up 50% per year. If we only do the uptrends, it's multiple hundreds of percent per year. It's enough. I don't need 110%.
Yep.
It's enough with 100.
But again, it goes back to the risk management and the risk curve we mentioned at the beginning. Okay, let's switch gears to a little bit of crypto, and then we go to a bit of macro. Wrong chart. Remove this. Hold on a second. There. Yes, Sol is still the black hole. We did have that quiet period in March where Solana was a little bit weak, but now we're seeing it taking over again. And all the money is leaving other chains and going back into Solana, 175 million from other chains, including 90 million from Ethereum to Solana alone. Ethereum had a big move last week, but now it's kind of retracing a bit again. And then the daily active users, again, are back too. We fell down to 3 or 4 million daily active users. Now it's back at 6.5 million. Near is number 2, 3.3 million. And Hyperliquid doesn't report their daily active users, but they do report transactions. And the amount of transactions on Hyperliquid is insane. Insane.
Hyperliquid is not high. It's in the thousands, not
thousands.
Like yeah.
But when they're doing $500 million trades at 40x, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's crazy. So that's kind of where we are. But people are still concerned. All right. Everybody is getting impatient. And we always say patience is very important in investing. People are losing their minds. It's like, okay, Bitcoin's nearly at all-time highs and Solana is nearly 50% away from all-time highs. What's going on here? Should people rotate out of Solana into MicroStrategy or Bitcoin or something else, or into Hyperliquid, or sit tight and wait and be patient? CTO, I'm going to give this one to you first. What do you think? Risky? Hold? And this would go for any other asset you hold too.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't have to be either or. If I can show a chart also, like you can take multiple positions. That's one way to reduce risk. And if one doesn't work out, maybe the other one does. Then you can exit the one that doesn't work out. If we look at this question, what's happening with Solana and ETH, actually, despite the drama, despite Solana's poor performance, Ethereum's recovery, nothing much has changed. If you look at this one, this is Solana versus ETH. You know, where's the drama here? It's not in the picture yet. Of course, if it starts falling out here, that's a different story, but it hasn't yet. Nothing has really happened.
And it's an upward channel, just so that people know. That means Solana is beating ETH over the long term.
Yes, exactly. We had thanks for clarifying. And if we look at the Sol to BTC chart, it did confirm an inverse head and shoulder. That is now retracing, but it hasn't been invalidated yet. If it invalidates, that would be here at 0.0015. So this is how I look at it. I can look at it in isolation. I don't need to choose either or. If this performs, great. If it doesn't, okay, then I can cut this one, and maybe the other one works out. So I feel that it's not strictly necessary to make one big bet. I don't need to bet on, like, should I go all in Solana here, or should I go all in Bitcoin, or should I go all in some yield or something else? No, I don't think like that. I think more in smaller pieces. Okay, this can be one trade for Solana. I can have Bitcoin as well. I might have some uranium. Maybe I have some gold. And the totality of that is that some work out in some periods, some work out in other periods. And on average, you get some diversification, which actually improves the situation, rather than that you take all your money and you throw it in one direction. And even if you're right, usually, sometimes you're wrong, and then you have like a massive catastrophe in your portfolio. That's usually worse.
Yeah, so exactly. And that's why, rotation is a very important thing, but the timing of rotation is so critical as well. And that's what can trip people up. Sometimes they'll jump from a fast horse to a slower horse, and then the faster horse will get even faster, and vice versa. So the timing is really, really important when it comes to that type of stuff as well. What else we have on the docket? People are still waiting for that Sol ETF. It's going to have a huge impact. We've got Solana treasuries. We've got two types of treasury companies now: Bitcoin treasuries, Solana treasuries, and they're doing really well. Like DeFi Dev Corporation on Friday went up 50%. Bonkers move for a stock, all because they said they're working with Bonk. So here we are. Meme coins are sneaking back in. Man, did you see that one?
Yeah, DeFi Development Corp is definitely going all in on Solana. That Bonk, I know this from anything that seems to touch Solana. You have these like crazy moves in the stock from Sol Strategies. So maybe this is the new coin, the new stock that is one of these proxies. Solana's an interesting one. Like, I just feel as though it continues to dominate on everything, and yet it continues to underperform. I have to say that, like I said last week, I do think, and everyone on this show might not like to hear it, but I do think there's a chance that ETH outperforms Solana here, just because I think there's a change in narrative for ETH, and I've been placing some more bets on the fact that ETH could outperform for a little bit. Bitcoin is still my biggest bag, but I just think that moving away from activity, if they can get that thing back to a burn, that's a narrative that I think can push on for a little bit longer. And I'd be unsurprised if ETH can break above like 3K, maybe 4K.
If Mando, on that one though, again, you look at fees, you look at transactions, you look at users. ETH and the L2s are just dwindling away. You got these new players like Hype, Sui, Say, Solana. Mm-hmm. They are destroying. Those four alone have completely destroyed ETH and all the layer 2s combined on any metric.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it across all the L2s and everything. Obviously, on number of transactions, Solana destroys it. But across all the L2s plus ETH, obviously the number of transactions is still definitely up there. Definitely beats Sui, for example. And in TVL, it's still massive. My point though here, James, is that, and I've said this last week, I don't think that activity is the only way that you value a chain. I just don't think it is.
Okay, let's look at fees. So Solana does 30x base fees, and base makes the second most amount of money on ETH. And Hype makes 40 times base fees. And Hype makes 4x Ethereum fees.
I think they look at it as a store of value at the same time. And I think Bitcoin's got this finite resource store of value. And if ETH can get back to being called deflationary, it's got a leg in it. In my opinion, it's got a leg in it where people can say, "Oh my God, this thing is ultrasound money again." And I think that's a strong narrative. At the moment, none of the other L1s have it, and ETH has been destroyed, absolutely destroyed for the last 2 years. So I've made some bets on the idea that I think that narrative alone for ETH will mean that it has a couple more decent candles in it over the next couple of months.
Yeah. And if I can add one thing there, that we have to remember that a lot of people are much more basic than we are here. We've lived with this for many years. We're thinking about, Sui and Hyperliquid and everything. A lot of other discussions, they're not that. They're sitting there. Should we invest in Bitcoin, or is it like a scam? We've read about it in the newspaper and someone says that, no, actually it's legit. And there's someone called Michael Saylor. Oh, really? Oh, yeah, maybe it is. Maybe we should allocate 2%. And then someone in the room says, and actually there are other currencies as well. The number 2 is, you can write programs on the blockchain, and it's called Ethereum, and it's very advanced, and there's some guy, mathematic genius behind it. Oh, really? Yeah, maybe we should invest some in that too. That's where the discussion is. And then Ethereum is the second biggest coin, so they allocate some 30% of the investment into Ethereum, and it seems like the Trump family is supporting it. That's the end of it. They will not talk about Sui and Hyperliquid and Solana and the pros and cons and fees and all that. It's just like it's the second coin. I think that could be enough to drive some money into it from a pure speculation perspective.
This was a great site as well.
Yeah. I'm not, as you can tell, I've been on this show for a year and a half, and pretty much the whole time I've been Solana. I just think that there's enough. This is the first time I've seen a shift in the actual narrative of ETH. The last one was around the time of the ETF, and I thought, maybe it has a shot then, and it just died. I think it's got enough. It's got enough to have a couple more candles in it, and I wouldn't count it out. And I've seen before when we call things dead, and then they just go. Sometimes when everyone hates something, and then it catches a narrative.
Yeah.
Like XRP.
XRP, exactly.
If you don't think it's going to be the best long-term investment, these things can really go. And my thought is that ETH can have one of those periods.
And I would love that to happen, because the market cap is so huge. If ETH took a move, that would trigger an alt season, and then it would flow to the rest. So I have no problem with ETH popping. I'd love to see ETH at $5,000, to be honest. But yeah, that's we'll see where it all goes. Let's switch gears. And what else do we have here? Covered rotation, market exit. I have this theory, which might be a little bit different, but that this cycle is a little bit different. Okay, in terms of rotation, I think the tariff tantrums delayed things by about 2 months. It took 2 months out of a traditional cycle. It used to be sell in May, go away, and now you've got S&P 500 rocketing in May, which is typically different. Do you believe, we spoke at the beginning of the 4-year cycle, kind of dead. Should people be preparing to pack their bags and leave, or could we run through the end of the year? Assuming we lost 2 months, the typical top is October. Does that mean it's pushed out to December, or maybe never? We never have a bear market again? And again, this is what people are continually asking. So it circles back to the first topic we had.
Look, this whole correlation to, in terms of the next few months, this whole correlation to global liquidity, there's been a little bit of retrenchment in global liquidity over the last month, just with the move in the dollar and the move in bond yields. And if you have a 3-month lag to that, you're talking about maybe we have a bit of a dip again in August. But I do think that we can rally for at least the next couple of months here and potentially put in an all-time high in multiple different altcoins, in my opinion. So, but then I would be wary of looking too far beyond that. We had this great thing with this lag of 12-week lag of global liquidity. And right now it's saying that maybe we have a little bit of a dip in August or around August. So I would just think about it in that sort of time zone. I don't know for the end of the year. I don't know.
And August, we always get dips everywhere because everybody's at the beach. So that makes complete sense. CTO, thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know the short term, but I do know one thing. That is that Donald Trump, love him or hate him, everyone can agree that he has a bit of an ego, I think. Ego. So before his 4 years are up, he will do everything for the market to be up, because that was his whole promise. It would be a enormous failure and hit on his ego if that doesn't happen. So before we get there, he's going to do everything. He's going to throw everything. He's going to sell his tie even to make money and make sure that the markets go up. So I don't know what will happen in 1 month, 2 months, but I do think that will happen. Within the next couple of years, I do think we will have another big bull run in markets. And if it happens in stock, it's going to pull with it, Bitcoin as well, and so on and so forth. So I'm very positive. And again, Bitcoin chart looks great here, close to a breakout. We won't miss it if it happens. 0% chance risk to miss it. Short term on the stocks, I don't know. Could be if the tariff debacle continues for another couple of months, could put a wet blanket, but sooner or later, I think that will end. And I do think we will get a big bull run.
And on that point, by the way, the market did rally after the election, and we are only 3% away from all-time highs in the S&P 500, which is basically we can reach it and touch it. So the market has rebounded. And after last week's news of all the money that's going to be invested from the Middle East into the US, they say over time it could be worth as much as $4 trillion. And everybody was there, Elon Musk, Lutnick, Jensen Huang, all the players. And the backroom deals are happening. And that I believe was huge. The Middle East has more money to drop into the US than China ever would have. And that's what people kind of miss. So that was, as far as I'm concerned, very bullish. Let's go to our penultimate topic. a question that people have. Any altcoins with 10x potential, or is it too late? We are 80% through the bull market, maybe never. The bull market could go on forever, but is there anything out there that people can pin their hopes and dreams on? And again, looking for this is unrealistic. It's very realistic at the bottom of the bear, but at this stage, I believe it's too late. Mando, would you be trying to sniff out a 10x right now?
There were some 10x's in the last few weeks on some of the stuff that got really beaten up, mainly AI and memes, right? A lot of that stuff is up 10x, 5x on some of the major coins. I think we spoke about how that AI market cap is back to 11 billion and the meme coin market cap is back to around 80 billion. So it's a big, big move up higher in a range of those different ones. From here, it's difficult. I would say 10x, you're just moving down the risk curve. I think we got a decent. We could easily have a 2x, 3x here in some of the major L1s. That's where I would kind of go for before the end of the year. I think Solana could go back to all-time high. I think, like I said, I think ETH could go and hit all-time high. Sui, I think, could do a 2x. Hyperliquid seems like an interesting one. Those seem like the best risk-reward plays for me here. Or if you want to go down the risk curve, then I would buy you can buy some of the DeFi things. Maybe on Solana, they have pretty good flywheels if things really start to heat up in terms of fees. You could buy some of the major memes, although I don't know if even they've got a 10x in them left. I'm trying to think what else. And yeah, you could still buy some of the like AI agent stuff. But I don't know if it's got a 10x in it right now.
Yep, good point. CTO, is that hopes and dreams to gun for a 10x, or is the game over? This is not the time to search for such things.
Yeah, so once again, if I can anchor my answer in another chart.
Yeah, of course. Charts are us.
Bitcoin dominance. And while we did have a break here, if you zoom out, you barely see it. So now we've had a whole of 2023, the whole of 2024, and almost half of 2025. And this just goes in a straight line up. So now we come to the point where everyone says that it will never be any other alt seasons. All the altcoins are dead. They're all scams. Nothing will ever move except Bitcoin. But I disagree. I don't think that the interest for speculation is going anywhere. I do think that we will have more cycles where suddenly Bitcoin is boring. It only delivers 5-10% of a return in a week, month, or day, and we want more. We want 100%. So then back into altcoins, I do think that we will have more of those cycles where there, valuations go completely out of proportion, completely unrealistic, and we have massive moves. But they are usually very short in time. We have to remember that when it happens, it's a couple of weeks or a couple of months at the most. So I do think we will have more alt seasons. When it will happen, I don't really know. If Bitcoin runs up now, I don't think it will happen now. Bitcoin will run up first, then some of those profits will go into more speculative, high risk assets. And we take it down.
And I have another comment on that, though, as well. I think this time is different because retail's not really in Bitcoin because of the unit bias. People are stacking and holding it, but they're not really speculating on it. I don't see that this time around. Mando, is that a weird theory? This is all institutions. This is all treasuries. This is all sovereigns. This is all pensions.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's very different. I am. As I said a couple of weeks ago, I'm a long-term Bitcoin dominance fan. I do think it's kind of up into the right. I think you could head towards 70%. I just think short-term, I think that ETH has got a couple of legs in it, which means that Bitcoin dominance, I don't see retracing all the way back up to that trend line right now. I think it's going to have a little bit of a period here of fighting it out, and I think we could have a little bit of an altcoin season. Just speaking about the what you just said before, there's been this move towards, by many prominent Bitcoiners, to trying to reclassify Bitcoin's unit as a Satoshi. Have you guys seen this?
Yeah, I saw it over the weekend.
Which will be a very interesting move if this now becomes the norm on major exchanges, because obviously there's been a lot of talk about Bitcoin isn't retail friendly because one Bitcoin is $105,000 right now.
Yeah.
And if you move to a Satoshi, which I think is 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin, right? Obviously that would be many zeros in front of it. So that would be a very interesting move to have Bitcoin.
It's so funny. I told a 5-year-old yesterday on the phone. I asked him, "Do you know about Bitcoin?" He said, "No. What's Bitcoin?" I said, "It's special digital money, and it costs about 105,000." He said, "105,000? That's a lot of money. Nobody can afford that." So you're dead right. The unit bias is so relevant. But yeah, that's crazy. If that would happen, imagine people would see Bitcoin as kind of like almost like a meme token, and affordable once again.
Suddenly Satoshi would be on Coinbase, right? You buy one Satoshi, which is, it suddenly changes everyone's mindset, particularly young people, I think.
Absolutely. I kind of like that idea. I'm sure CTO supports it too. We're going to wrap up on the hour for the first time in forever. One last little story. 30-year yields in the US go over 5% today, which is massive. That means the mortgage rate could go above 8%, which would take the real estate market further down the toilet. And Japan is having a Greek-like crisis. Now, the reason we mention this, because it all ties back to Bitcoin. Bond market fails. It doesn't matter what the stock market does. I think Mr. Keyframe said that as well a minute ago. A sovereign debt spiral, what that would impact, basically flight to safety would be Bitcoin. And global monetary shifts. I mean, printing is happening like crazy. We saw the increase in liquidity, and there's a lot of nerves about debt. We had the downgrade as well last Friday after the market, which rattled everybody. How good is all this stuff for Bitcoin? Mando first again.
Good over the medium term. It can be a little bit worrying over the short term. That's basically what I would say.
Yeah.
Generally, when bond yields move like this and they move higher this aggressively, and this is not just a Japan thing, this is globally. I think the US 30-year just is comfortably above 5%. You're seeing the highest mortgage rates in many decades. Those are the two pockets of worry, I think, macro right now, is some sort of sovereign trips up here because bond yields go so high that they can't cover interest payments. And the second thing is most probably the US housing market, just because there's a lot of people in debt in the US who probably took out crazy mortgages to buy homes, even on fixed. And if house prices go down, like that can be a little bit of a worrying scenario if you've got 700 Airbnbs or whatever it is. So I think those are the two major worries on global markets right now. The US housing market deteriorating, and there's a lot of signs that that's happening. And then the second thing is one of these sovereigns faces a worry. Japan and UK would probably be the two biggest. You could argue the US too. And then there's lots of smaller EM countries where this is a worry. But that is good for Bitcoin in the long run. Like if you're in any of those countries and you're like, God, I need to get my money out, you buy Bitcoin. But in the short term, if there's some sort of collapse, often that means a market where stocks can drop, 10%, and that brings Bitcoin down with it. So
yeah, I saw a huge surge in demand for Bitcoin out of Brazil as well over the last couple of weeks when they're facing the exact same thing. CTO, bond yields, I know you track them. Japan, Greek-like crisis. They can no longer control the curve. How bad is this? Do you have a chart to share?
I do. It looks crazy, right?
Yeah, and they're freaking out. Japan is in a world of hurt anyway with the child crisis, aging population. Industry is being ravaged by the Chinese car makers and Tesla. It's really scary situation for that country.
Oh, yeah.
Shout out to anybody who was here.
This is going crazy. I can't overlook it. I don't really understand what will happen if this continues. It's really a macro question. I'm not sure. It's a scary looking chart, isn't it?
Yep.
And it's going fast.
Japan has about 300, just over 300% debt to GDP ratio as well. So it's not like it can grow out of this in some sort of easy
They're destroyed.
route.
They need to print a ton of money and buy Bitcoin. You're listening, President Usadi or whatever his name is. I don't know his name.
Exactly. President, subscribe to the channels and go buy Bitcoin.
Good point. Don't forget to subscribe to everybody and links below. We don't care where you're watching on whose channel, but make sure you follow these legends. But yeah, this is basically an advertisement for Bitcoin as far as I'm concerned. Fiat is spiraling. And remember, risk happens fast. So when this stuff does break, it's going to be, as Mando said, short term, horrific, terrifying. Medium term, all good for Bitcoin.
Well, guys, I really want to ask you again, what happens? What happens if this continues? Like the thing with trends is that sometimes they get much more sticky. What happens if this continues, guys?
So with Japan, this has been a surprise for like Japan for a long, long time. So Japan's a really high debt to GDP for a long time, and everyone's always wondered like why bond yields aren't high. Like it's so high. Part of it is like it's all domestically owned. So like it's all owned by Japanese retail and or Japanese firms. So there's this concept of like, unlike with the US where all their deficits are funded by other countries, this is actually funded by just Japan itself mainly. So you don't tend to get the same sort of level of spiral. And people have said that if it was to happen, like it would be less international in terms of its like takeout. That being said, like Japan, as James said, it's like a big issue right now. They obviously have a declining population. They are seeing a pickup in economic growth, which is why this is going higher. But they're going to face massive fiscal deficits here if this continues. I don't know what this is going to do to the housing market. Japanese housing has been like this hilarious trade where like it hasn't really gone higher in like 30 years because the population's gone down over that period. And if bond yields go up, like, well, it can be a big worry.
That's why Arthur Hayes lives there.
There's lots of countries. There's lots of countries that default. You know,
yeah.
Japan is up there as probably the highest risk out of the G20 or like the top 10 biggest economies in the world. That
So I'll try and explain when this happens, CTO. The cost of borrowing, of course, goes up, which destroys businesses that are already on razor-thin margins. So the economy slows down. But also the higher the yield, the more attractive the currency, which means the Japanese yen goes up in value, which means they can't export anything because their cars, etc., become more expensive. Their steel. So it's ugly, ugly, ugly across the board. And also the fiscal situation of the country itself, as the yields go up, the cost of servicing that 3x GDP debt is impossible. So the death spiral happens and it spins out of control. This is where people like Ray Dalio, this is his end of the world scenario, Great Reset. This is exactly playing out in Japan right now. I don't want to alarm anybody if we have any viewers from Japan, but it is pretty terrifying. And they have lost control. For 30 years, they were controlling the long end. Now they can't anymore. It's spiraling out of control. So this is alarming. And again, they should fire up that little, whatever, Japanese yen printer and just buy as much Bitcoin as possible. Build an SPR before the US. That's what I would do if I was running the country.
They're buying a ton of gold. That's one thing that you always hear about. Retail in Japan, they were slow to Bitcoin. Japan in general, they've been very quick to just buy as much gold as possible. This is where the gold demand is coming from right now. Japanese.
Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up. Mando, you started the show saying you would be very surprised if we didn't hit a new Bitcoin all-time high this week. Still sticking to that?
I'd eat my hat. I'd eat my hat if we don't touch Bitcoin all-time.
Get your knife and fork ready for next week. So your outlook is positive. CTO, what's your outlook for the next week?
Yeah, I'm very excited here, actually. And we're an inch from breakout here. And then, there could be one fake down, try to liquidate some new entrants and then run it up. But I'm very positive here, unless we have some massive stock crash or something like that. I think it looks extremely good here.
Yeah, and there was definitely a rundown. If you look at the range just over the last 24 hours, it's $5,200. So there was that rundown to liquidate some leverage longs that were maybe listening to this hype James Wayne. and his move made people very bullish. Well, I want to thank you both, gentlemen. I hope our friend Marty has been able to get through the border. He's in transit, missed the show, but that's okay. We'll always be here anyway. Even if it's just one of us on our own, we'll always be here every Monday for you all. Don't forget to like and subscribe, everybody below. Thank you so much, Mr. Mando. Thank you much, CTO. See you all next week. Have a great week, everybody. Be safe out there, and hope everybody's okay in Japan.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.